here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with AB 1788. We're going to talk about what it allows and what it prohibits. We're going to talk about its impact on the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. And we're going to talk about what you need to do moving forward. What do you do with the existing bait in the field? Where can you use the second generation anticoagulants? And what do you need to do to stay legal? After that, we'll talk about the alternate products, the products you can use, and of the products you can use, what their characteristics and what their formulations are. And then we'll wrap it up with alternative treatment techniques, try to wrap in some of the IPM. We'll talk about monitoring as a technique, trapping, and then exclusion. So with all that said, I'd like to kick it over to Danny Hutton, who's going to give us an overview of AB 1788.
All right, thank you, John. So as we all feared, over the past 5 or 6 years, we've been going to the Capitol as an industry and talking to legislators and their aides and posing our opposition to this rodenticide bill. Well, oddly enough, during 2020, when we couldn't go to the Capitol, Bloom got his bill pushed through. So thank you for that, COVID. Just tack that on to everything else. But the way that this bill was originally written, it was flawed. It was written as a ban, and the problem with a ban on products is that once you ban a product, it's gone, and it's gone for everybody, right? We can't use it. The government and their agencies and their employees can't use it. It's basically non-existent. And so when the bill was originally written as a ban, the legislators basically made a mistake with that, and they had to rewrite the bill. And once they rewrote the bill, they wrote it as a restriction. And as a restriction, that means that there are still uses for it. So AB 1788 was not aimed at banning products. It is aimed at restricting products. So if you have some out there, you can still use it. It's not banned, it's just a restriction. So first thing first, what did they put restrictions on? What's going under reevaluation? And really, why is this happening? So we're really talking about second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, right? Those are what's being restricted and what's going under reevaluation. Now, currently in California, there are 69 of these products. The ones common to our industry are, there's really 4 of them, but 3 of them are what we're concerned with because difenicum is not really used on the professional market. Now, you might see it because it's probably available online or at Tractor Supply stores or anything like that. But in the professional market, we don't really deal with difenicum. We're really talking bromadiolone, difethiolone, and brodifacoum. So the second generation anticoagulants all have a few common traits, right? And these common traits are largely what also made them very, very effective, right? The second generation anticoagulants, what they do is they reduce the blood's ability to clot and cause bleeding. So if you think about a rodent, right? A rodent's cardiovascular system is highly advanced. Their heart beats at a tremendous pace, 300, 400, 500 times a minute. And so you introduce an anticoagulant into their cardiovascular system, into their bloodstream, you can see how well that would work, right? And so we used part of the rodent's attributes against it, which is kind of what we do with other insecticides and pesticides. But anyway, so the second gens were also single feed rodenticides, meaning that, after a single feeding, they would get a lethal dose and that would be enough to kill them. However, there was a delay between the feeding and mortality. So a rodent would feed on the bait, get a lethal dose, and there'd be 4 to 6 days before they died. So they could potentially keep feeding on that bait, which would increase the concentration of active ingredient in that rodent. So they keep feeding on it, they build up the concentration of active ingredients, go off and die within 4 to 6 days. So the problem is that the half-life of the second generation anticoagulant baits was long. I mean, up to, they say, 90 days in a rodent after it died. So you'd still have all that active ingredient inside the rodent. The one good thing that a lot of people liked about the second-gen anticoagulants and anticoagulants in general is that there was a perceived kind of safety net to this thing, right? If there was an accidental exposure or non-target got into it, then you could administer vitamin K1 and it would help. It would help a lot. It's not a silver bullet. It wouldn't solve all the problems all the time, but it would help. And a lot of people like that aspect about the second gens. The second gens that we were commonly using in our market were, again, the active ingredient brodifacoum, which was found in Syngenta's Talon family of products, and Bell Labs' Final family of products. Brodifacoum, this was one of the more active of the second-gen anticoagulants. It was very, very effective on rodents at a very low percentage, which was great. But the problem is that it had some non-target toxicology issues. One, because again, it was very active at a very low rate, but two, the half-life of this specific second-gen anticoagulant was really, really long. And so being that it was very, very active and it stayed in rodents and non-targets, rodents for a long time, which led it susceptible to non-targets, whether that's predatory or scavengers after mortality. That was an issue, but also for any non-targets like dogs or anything. Again, it was a very active second-gen anticoagulant, so it would be very, very toxic to anybody who got exposed to it. Here's the LD50 of the brodifacoum. This also just shows how little of the actual active ingredient you'd have to get to reach the LD50. You're talking about 1.8 ounces of finished product. So that's a bait block, right? You get 2 or 3 of these bait blocks accidentally, and it's problematic. The next second-gen anticoagulant active ingredient we're going to talk about is bromadiolone. This is found in Bell's Contract family of products and Leafitech's Mackie family of products, and also Leafitech's soft baits, or Resolve soft bait, I'm sorry. So bromadiolone, this was by far probably the most used second gen. Again, it was affordable, it was effective, it had that perceived safety net of that vitamin K1, but also the tox package on dogs and non-targets was a lot less than, say, the brodifacoum, right? You're looking at more than 77 ounces of finished product of bromadiolone to hit the LD50 for a 22-pound dog. So whereas brodifacoum was, almost 2 ounces, this is 77 ounces. So it was perceived as a lot safer. But we're not making the rules. We're just kind of working within the framework that we got. And bromadiolone was one of the ones that has been restricted as well. Difenacoum, as I said before, not really seen on the professional market, so we're not going to really spend time talking about that. Difethialone. Difethialone is the last second gen that we're going to talk about. This is seen on the professional market in Leafitech's Generation products, its Blue Max products, and its First Strike soft baits. Difethialone also, it had a really good tox package for dogs, right? You're looking at 56 plus ounces to reach the LD50. It also came in a number of different sizes and formulation for convenience for the PMPs. So that was a benefit for us in our industry, but it was also a good alternative to bromadiolone without having to, go to brodifacoum and go into, the most active of those second gens. So we had really good products that worked really well on rodents, using the rodent's biology against itself, while still being perceived as safe. But things happen, and the government didn't see it that way, and so reevaluation. The basis of reevaluation really is from DPR. DPR registers these second gens to control rodents, and a target pest will consume some second gen after one feeding, a lethal dose after one feeding, right? But the way that as I said before, the way that the second gen anticoagulant works is it takes time to kill the rodent. And so the rodent might keep feeding, it'll build up that concentration in the rodent. The half-life of that second generation anticoagulant is long. The rodent will go off and die. And in the body of the dead rodent, there will still be second generation anticoagulants. DPR had received reports that these dead rodents with these active ingredients still in them were being picked up or eaten by either scavengers or hunted on by prey before they died. But with all of that active ingredient still inside of them, that active ingredient then went on to the secondary non-target, right? And then they're saying that there was enough active ingredient in these rodents to basically poison the secondary non-targets. So as you can see here, there's a very simple illustration of what they're trying to say. They're trying to say the rodent here eats the bait and then is either eaten by a predator, and then that predator might be eaten by a higher on the food chain predator, and then this trickle down effect of active ingredient will reach all the way through up until the highest member on the food chain, whoever ate either the rodent or whoever ate the rodent or ate the thing that ate the rodent, so to speak. So the EPA and the environmental groups and legislators concluded that the second generation anticoagulants had been the result of countless wildlife deaths. Now we're talking mountain lions, bobcats, foxes. It even went all the way down to some of the endangered species, which just kind of compounded the issues. So they basically handcuffed us now, right? They put restrictions on these second gens, which as an industry, we really liked. We loved them. I mean, they worked well and they were affordable and effective. So DPR put some restrictions on us. Now, while we have some pretty good answers here and a pretty good framework on what we can and can't do, DPR hasn't given us definitive answers on everything, right? So there are still some gray areas. Now, as an industry, PCOC sat down with DPR, went through the entire bill, wrote out some questions to get clarity on, and DPR was kind enough to help us out with that. And they published an enforcement letters and sent those to the county ag commissioners, kind of guidelines or parameters on what to enforce and how to enforce it. So we're going to go through all of that right now. So we're gonna go through kind of the cans and the can'ts of where we can still use and who can use the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. So the cans. So there are a number of areas that government agencies and their employees can still use these second gens, right? If they're being used by a certified vector control technician who is employed by a vector control district or other agency for any public health activities. So if they are, baiting for rodents in a sewer, or if there's a public complaint of a rodent infestation, vector control can still go out and use these second gens. And then any government agency who's protecting our water supply infrastructure. So if there's any rodents burrowing in any dams or reservoirs or infesting any of our drinking water facilities or any pipes or anything like that, then the government agencies there can also still go use second generation anticoagulants to control that issue. Now, it's an important point here to note that if you're subcontracted as a pest control company, if you're subcontracted by a government agency to go do rodent work, you do not get this exemption. You are still prohibited from using second generation anticoagulants. Don't know exactly why that is, but that comes straight from DPR. All right, so where else can we use these things? This is really kind of the meat and potatoes of where us as an industry are still allowed to use the second gens. If you think about our food supply, right? If you think about the production and processing and packaging of our food, then anywhere in that framework, you're pretty much exempt for the most part. Now, each situation is different, and DPR likes to say that each situation will be reviewed separately on its own, but if you think food and food supply, generally it's exempt. So in agricultural activities, agricultural production sites such as anything producing horticulture or viticulture, dairy, livestock, poultry, or any farm products, you're looking at, you can still use second gens there. Other food production sites include slaughterhouses and canneries. Wineries and breweries were also on that list. And then it said factory, and factory on the initial bill just said factory, right? And that's a gray area. PCOC, as I said, sat down with DPR and they said, listen, what's a factory? So in this bill, factory is used in the context with winery and brewery. So DPR stated that it should be interpreted that a factory is any facility related to the manufacturing of food, right? So it's really just a food production factory, food production facility. I don't know why they had to call it a factory and confuse everybody, but that's what it is. So a factory would be an example of anything that's doing any canning or freezing, any cooking, pasteurization, milling, grinding, chopping, all that stuff, fresh packing. Those are all factories. And so in those situations, you can still use second gens. On the original bill, it also just said warehouse. Again, a very gray area. It took us to go sit down with them and ask them to say, hey, you know, what's a warehouse? And so a warehouse under this bill is any building or warehouse that is used to store food for human or animal consumption. So it's pretty much just food. You can't be storing sports equipment in a warehouse and get an exemption, right? It has to just do with food. And then, of course, any on-farm housing of right-of-way or transportation infrastructure materials. Again, it's on-farm. I think it has to still do with the food production aspect of it. So those are all exempt. An important note here is that there is no exemptions for fulfillment centers or distribution centers. So your large grocery store chains, your Costco's and stuff, or Targets and Walmarts who still have food, they have these large facilities that they move stuff in and out of. Those actually don't qualify as warehouses. So those are not exempt. If you do any of those large distribution centers or anything, you're prohibited from using the second gens. Okay, where else can we use them? In our industry, in non-ag settings. So this is outside of the food production now. If you do any accounts that generate any medical waste, a medical office, dental office, vet office, those are all exempt. Any clinics or hospitals, surgery centers, again, those are all exempt. They're generating medical waste. The bill also, oddly enough, had pet shops and trauma scene waste management practitioners on there. I don't know. It was on the bill, so if you guys are doing any of those accounts, you are exempt. Pharmacies. Pharmacies was a strange one, and DPR hasn't given us a definitive answer on this one yet, but pharmacies generate medical waste, and DPR said that there is no exemption for a pharmacy. Building on that, though, is that if pharmacies are exempt, if DPR decides that they are exempt because they're unsure about it right now, then you've got CVS's, you've got Walgreens, you've got Targets and Safeways and Costco's. All of these places have pharmacies inside. So, what do we do at that point? We don't know. Once that information comes down, we will get that information out to you guys. Any FDA registered facility, inspected facility that's involved in preparing or compounding of drugs, those are all exempt. And then if you guys do any work on any islands that have non-native invasive species of rodents, you can use these second gens out there still. So if you're doing work on Catalina Island or something and they've got rodents out there, you are more than welcome to use second gens. Also in the non-ag settings, in our industry, if you're using these second gens to control an actual or potential infestation associated with a public health emergency, you are good to go to use these. However, before you get there, you have to go through a process. Now, first of all, the situation has to pose a significant risk to human health. If it does, then you can petition your local public health officer or your state public health officer, But before you do that, you have to document that you've gone through and exhausted all the other control measures to solve this rodent problem. If you can prove that you've exhausted all the measures and it's not working, and then you petition the local or state public health officer, then they might give you that exemption to go ahead and use this second gens. However, this now basically brings the public health officer into our industry in a bigger role than they've ever been. So we don't know how that's going to really shake out. We shall see. But again, as things come in, because we're all still kind of learning this thing, as things come in, we will get it out to you as fast as possible. And then lastly, if you are doing any research for DPR related to the reevaluation process with their scientific staff, you will need to get approval from the director first, but if you're helping them out with that, you will get exemption for using it for research purposes. All right, so where can't we use them? Now, the cans might have seemed long because they were just very, very specific, but the cans obviously encompass, unfortunately, pretty much everything else. So you're looking at any residential or home uses are no longer acceptable. Uses in and around restaurants are no longer acceptable. However, a little gray, not a gray area, but a little loophole is if there's a restaurant that is attached to the winery or brewery that you might be doing, then you're okay to use the second gens there. Any grocery stores, transportation vehicles, timber yards, schools, golf courses, cemeteries, parks, everything is pretty much out. So outside of that food production and medical waste in our industry, everything else is pretty much exempt. I mean, not exempt, but prohibited. So if you can just concentrate on pretty much those two aspects, food production or any medical waste, then everything else you can just assume is prohibited. All right, what else should we know about this bill? Well, what do we do with all the bait that's in the bait stations that you guys currently have out there that might be in prohibited non-exempt accounts? Well, DPR stated that as of January 1st, that bait actually needed to be removed. Now, there's no grace period, they said, so they're not giving you like 3 or 4 months to get it all out, in your next quarterly service or whatever that might be. They want it out. It's a little tough because this enforcement letter came out not too long ago, but that's what it is. Now, it's obviously up to the county ag inspectors, and enforcement on this bill will be at the county level. So, talk to your county ag inspectors and commissioners, basically ask them what their expectations are and move on from there. What should you do with the bait that's removed? Well, this bill doesn't change the labeling law. So your label pretty much says you can wrap it up in paper for the most part and throw it out. However, when we posed this question to DPR, they suggested that you guys contact your local hazardous waste disposal program. Now, I did a little bit of phone calls or reached out to some people, and there's a household hazardous waste program that has free events that small businesses can qualify for. So if you're generating less than 220 pounds a month of hazardous waste, you can actually either schedule an appointment or go up to one of these events and drop off your hazardous waste pretty much for free, I think, for the most part, if not a very small fee. Now, if there's going to be, a lot of hazardous waste, then you're probably gonna have to sign up, make an account at one of the larger hazardous waste disposal companies and proceed that way. But for the most part, this household hazardous waste program would probably fit most of the businesses. And then, as I said before, this is being enforced at the county level. DPR sent out that guidance letter, which is on this page right here. This guidance letter to all the county ag commissioners, and this pretty much sets the parameters of what they're going to enforce and how they're going to enforce it. And so for the most part, we have a good idea of what we can and can't do. There are a couple gray areas, such as, the pharmacies or say a brewery inside a strip mall, where does, where does the treatment start and end there? for, the buildings and the buildings around it. So as that information comes in, we'll definitely get it out to you. But if I could just suggest that, err on the side of being conservative. If you think about the food production for the most part, and medical production or medical waste, those are pretty much your exemptions. So stay inside that framework, and you guys should be okay.
Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Wes. Danny just went over everything that we are losing. I'm going to kind of go over what we still can use and the formulations to go along with it. So I'm going to start there with the formulations, if this will work for me. So when you're picking a new bait, there's two main things that you want to consider. The first is the formulation, and then the second is the active ingredient. I'm going to start here with the formulation. So there's a couple of main formulations. The two main ones are block baits and soft baits. There's a couple others that are more specific use, which are liquid baits, place packs, oats and pellets, and monitoring. And I will get into those shortly. So let's start with the block baits. Block baits are formulated with an active ingredient and seed held together by wax. They're designed for easy application. They slide right onto a rod in a bait station for the rodent to gnaw on. Going back to the block baits, they're formulated with seed and an active ingredient held together with wax. Like I said, they're really easy to use. They're designed to slide right onto a bait station rod for rodents to gnaw on, but not be able to remove from the bait station. In my personal experience, I've found if they get really chewed down and weathered away, they can fall off the rod in the bait station and be removed. So it's just something to watch out for. Palatability is sometimes an issue with the blocks because the rodents sometimes don't really like the wax. And slugs and snails are another issue with wax with the blocks, because a lot of times you'll open up the station and find snails all over the bait, and you're losing bait that way. A little tip for not losing the bait to snails is if you put the blocks inside a like a Ziploc baggie, the rodents will still be able to chew through it, but the snails won't. So the next most common one are soft baits. These are kind of the most recent innovation in rodenticides. Leafitech is really leading the industry in soft bait formulations. They are active ingredients mixed together with finely milled grains and vegetable oils. Both of these are highly palatable to rodents, especially when they are together. Like I said, the active ingredient is mixed directly into the formulation, which means that the entire block or soft bait is going to have some active ingredient in it. So no matter how much or how little of the bait they eat, they are getting active ingredient. Soft baits come with a thin permeable packaging that allows rodents to still smell the attractants in the bait and be able to chew through them easily, but it will keep things like bugs and snails from being able to chew on the bait. A couple other formulations that are less common. First, we have place packs. You can see an example here. Place packs are less of a formulation. They're more of a delivery system. As you can see, it's loose grain inside of a thin paper packaging. We also have oat baits, which are good for things like ag settings with gophers and ground squirrels. And we also have liquid baits, which are well suited for environments where they might not have any other access to water. It could be good for that situation. Last, we have monitoring. These really aren't a bait because there's no active ingredient in it, but they have the same inert ingredients as the active baits. So these are really good for two things. The first one is pre-baiting. What you can do is put them in the same bait stations that you'll otherwise be using, and you'll get the rodents familiar with the idea of going into the bait stations and taking the bait out of there. They're also good for what's called monitoring. So one example of what you could use is if you have a large commercial account, for example, where you have a lot of bait stations over a large property, and you're only getting activity in, say, one corner of the property, you can put these out and then only switch in active bait in the areas where you're actually getting activity. So you'll be saving bait that way. These come in multiple formulations. This is a soft bait we have an example of. These are the Leafotech rat and mouse attractants, and they also come in block formulations. So now let's get into the active ingredients that we still do have at our disposal. I just want to reiterate what Danny was saying. AB 1788 is not a ban on all rodenticides. It's only restricting second-gen anticoagulants. We still have a lot of great active ingredients at our disposal. So getting into the active ingredients, we'll start with the different modes of action that we have. Each of these have a different mode of action. We have the first generation anticoagulants, the neurotoxins, and the calcium liberators that we'll get into shortly here. Starting with the first generations. These are anticoagulants that were invented before 1970. There are 3 active ingredients that are used. There's warfarin, that was the original to come along, chlorfacinone, and difacinone. The first generations had the same mode of action as the second generations. These reduced the blood's ability to clot, leading to internal hemorrhaging and eventually death. The only thing about first generations is they are a less toxic version, so they're going to require multiple feedings typically per rodent in order to kill them. So this could result in bait shyness. If a rodent eats enough to not kill it, but to make it sick, it could get scared away from going back to that bait. First gens are rather slow working. They typically take between 4 and 6 days. One of the main reasons is because it requires those multiple feedings. But just like the second gens, they do have the antidote vitamin K1, but you do have to remember that K1 is not a sure thing. It all depends on the size of the animal, the breed, the age. So there's a lot of factors that go into it besides just having an antidote. A couple of the active ingredients, more specifically, there is warfarin. Like I said, this was the original first gen rodenticide to come along, but it's really not commonly used today. It's still found in kaput, rat, and mouse bait. It comes in a place pack, and it does have voles on the label if you ever need a product for that. Next, we have chlorfacinone. Leafotech has a product that they're working on getting registered in California. It is chlorfacinone in a soft bait. It's called Flatline. We're hoping to have it by March of this year, but we will see with California. They also have a product called Borderline. One benefit is it allows for baiting for voles in their actual burrows, but it is a restricted use material. And lastly, we have Rosol tracking powder. It's good for things like wall voids, but it's got a warning label. So our last active ingredient in the first gens is the most commonly used active for first gens. It's difaccinone. You can find these in the JT Eaton peanut butter blocks, which is the difaccinone product that we would recommend. It's also found in Audios Combo Bait, which is an interesting product because it contains difaccinone as well as the insecticide imidacloprid to kill fleas that are feeding on rodents. It is also found in Ditrac and Liquitox. So moving on to our next mode of action is a neurotoxin. This is an acute rodenticide. It's called bromethalin. It is an ATP inhibitor. Essentially what that means is it's going to stop energy production within the cells of the rodents. This will create a buildup of fluids in the spinal cord and brain, resulting in neurological dysfunction, paralysis, and pretty quickly death. Just like all rodenticides, you have to be careful around non-target exposures. Bromethalin does not have an antidote, but there are treatments available. It takes between 3 and 20 ounces of 0.01% rodenticide to hit the LD50 of a 22-pound dog. Now, this is a perfect example of why it's not really black and white with non-target exposures, because between 3 and 20 ounces is a pretty broad range. So it all depends on the breed of the dog, the age, the health. There's a lot of factors just besides the no antidote. Bromethalin's great for cleanouts. It's a single feed rodenticide that will work really quickly. Between 2 and 3 days, you'll start seeing kills. So if you have a large infestation that you need to get under control as quick as possible, bromethalin is the best way to go. You can find bromethalin in Lipotec's Takedown Soft Bait. This is going to be the product that we recommend if you're going towards bromethalin, but it's also available in Fast Track and Talprid for moles. So our last mode of action is a calcium liberator. This is cholecalciferol. It's a naturally occurring chemical, vitamin D3. It's actually produced in our own bodies when our skin is exposed to sunlight. It's also a pretty common supplement that a lot of people take. However, when it's in high doses, it's a pretty powerful rodenticide. So it works by releasing calcium into the blood, which causes hypercalcification of the organs, and it will result in organ failure. Again, like bromethalin and all other rodenticides, you have to be careful around non-targets because there is no antidote, but treatments are available. There are some products with cholecalciferol that have a bittering agent added, like Bitrex, for example, to discourage feeding mainly in children, but it's not at a dose that rodents can taste it. It takes about 2 pounds of 0.075% rodenticide to reach the LD50 of a 22-pound dog. 2 pounds is pretty high. That's more than you'll have on pretty much any account typically at one time. So we feel that cholecalciferol is a pretty safe product. It works relatively quickly. Typically, it takes between 3 and 5 days to start seeing death. One nice thing about cholecalciferol is it has what's called a stop feed action. So what this means is once a rodent has ingested a lethal dose of cholecalciferol, it will make it feel sick. It won't continue to keep feeding on the bait. So what that means is you'll get the same efficacy, the same amount of kills using a lot less bait than you would with, say, a second generation where they're going to continue feeding on it. Cholecalciferol can be used in organic situations depending on the organic certification organization that you're going through. So always check with them before you use it at an organic food production facility, for example. Cholecalciferol is found in BASF's Cilantro soft bait. Cilantro is, in our opinion, the best bait to go to for a general baiting program. We feel that it's the best balance of safety, efficacy, and cost-effective on the market for a regular baiting program. So just to recap here, we've got 3 real choices when it comes to replacing your second gens. We've got the first generation anticoagulants, we've got the bromethalin-based products, and we've got cholecalciferol-based products. So that is it.
All right, guys. So we spoke with Danny about AB 1788 and what we are losing. We spoke with Wes Woodward about what exactly we can still use. And now let's talk about how we can put these baits and use other sort of mechanical measures to control rodents. So the first thing we need to talk about is we need to secure our bait. We've all seen the infamous pizza rat. And one thing that the pizza rat can teach us is that they are great translocators. That's why it is very, very important to secure our bait. We have tons and tons of different bait stations out there on the market right now, and they all do different jobs. We have mouse bait stations, rat bait stations. We have bait stations that look pretty and bait stations that, you know, aren't very keen looking. But that being said, let's jump into the JT Eaton top loader. This gives us, it's very functional in high moisture areas, very functional if it may be snowing, maybe it's rainy weather, maybe you're using a liquid rodenticide. You can put this JT Eaton liquid bait dispenser inside of this top loader because it is compatible. We can see on the inside that this rod comes down from the cap, which holds your bait blocks as high off of the ground to keep moisture from touching it, so we can have more longevity to our rodenticides by keeping it dry. It's really nice because there's only one screw that holds that top lid on the cap onto the bait station. You know, you only have to take that screw out a couple turns. You don't have to remove it completely to take off that cap. And you can also secure it to fences, trees, and other areas around the structure. The Aegis-RP bait station is another great bait station. This comes in both the anchored and non-anchored. The non-anchored is very, very easy to place in areas with zip ties. We can see that this pest management professional placed it on a pipe right there on the top right, just, you know, using this rodent run to their advantage. And it also accepts snap traps as well as 8-ounce blocks. It's really nice that you can put this bait station on its side, again, keeping moisture off of the bait. The Aegis-RP anchor, same concept, except this has an anchor on it. The key is very, very easy to use. A quarter turn to open the bait station. It opens away from the wall, so you're not surprised, you know, if anything jumps out at you. The hinges are made very, very strong. It is a great looking professional design. The Protective Mouse RTU and the Aegis mouse. These are our mouse bait stations that we're talking about. They are both great for small and tight areas and cabinets, under pallets, and other hard to reach places. And they each, the RTU holds 1-ounce blocks, and the Aegis mouse is very, very good for holding soft baits. With AB 1788 in effect, a lot of people are moving towards Cilantro. And the Aegis mouse bait station is a great station to use soft baits as well as block baits if we're controlling mice. The Evo Express is also compatible with baiting and trapping by accommodating 8 1-ounce blocks, as well as the T-Rex style or the Catchmaster Easy Set rat traps inside of it. B&G Fast Catch Station, a lot of people are moving towards putting snap traps inside of their stations, and the B&G Fast Catch will accommodate all of our snap traps. It also has an alert on the top of the station, which will quickly alert you if you have any activity, if that snap trap has gone off yet. So now that we've talked about the bait stations, let's get into trapping. The first thing I want to talk about are the glue traps. We have many different kinds of glue traps and glue boards available. So why are we going to use the glue traps? Well, we have pros and cons, just like everything. The pros, they are non-toxic, meaning that we can place these where rodenticides are not permitted, whether it be schools, hospitals, kitchens, or food processing areas. We can easily cut and fold into tight spaces, and there is no cleaning or resetting when we're using the glue traps. The cons, however, mice don't usually die quickly or quietly, so homeowners and other people will be able to hear and or see the rodents on these glue boards, and people don't like that a whole lot. We really want to avoid our non-target catches by keeping these glue boards in a safe place that is inaccessible to kids, pets, and other non-targets. So putting them in tunnels and stations and other non-frequented environments will assure us to not get for any non-target catches. The Catchmaster Slim is a pretty nifty product that accommodates the 72 TC3. It's just a TC, a tin cap glue board that is perforated into 3 sections. The skinny design allows for a low profile placement, so putting this behind refrigerators, underneath sinks, behind pallets. Our team in the warehouse ran these over with our forklift, and it held up, and so we know it's very, very, very durable. The Catchmaster Multi-Catch is another great tin cat that is available to us. It's a live catch trap that is easy to use, and we can also put glue boards inside of them. They advertise that it catches up to 30 mice at one time, and this low profile allows it to be placed in very tight areas, and we can use it with or without a glue board. The Kness Pro Catch is a great tin cat available to us. It is similar to the multi-catch. The difference here is we see the teeter-totters, those entry points of this tin cat are attached to the lid to make it very, very easy to clean the inside. Non-target catches. PETA calls these glue boards the pan of pain. Unfortunately, these are the non-target catches we are trying to limit. Of course, we want to keep it away from pets and children and wildlife as well. We also have the 72 MB, which is an easy to place, and you can fold these into tunnels to not only catch insects, but also mice as well. The TC is the glue board that fits easily into those tin cats. Great for those hard to reach areas where larger glue boards may not fit, a standalone glue board, or putting them into a station. And then of course the rat trays for those heavier rodents running around attics. We need to make sure we keep these also out of reach of children and pets, because they are large and powerful, and we just do not want these in contact with anyone. The Hercules putty is very, very secure, and it's powerful enough to hold a 1 pound Norway rat in testing. And then snap traps. Guys, we have a lot of different snap traps out there on the market. The Victor mouse and rat are those wooden snap traps. They are tried and true, been in our industry forever, and they're not going anywhere. They become with both a middle trigger and an expandable trigger. Dr. Bobby Corgan, who is an expert on rodents, always says the expandable yellow trigger is the go-to because it is a larger surface for the rodent to trip. They are safe to use, but should be used in places not readily accessible to pets and children to prevent any sort of tampering. We all know it hurts pretty bad when those things snap on your fingers, so keeping those out of reach of children whenever we place those as well. The Catchmaster Easy Set Rat, very, very strong gripping teeth. We can see that it overlaps in that picture right there on the top. It is also designed to fit in very low profile bait stations because it only opens up 45 degrees. Some stations won't accept a full Victor wooden 180 degree metal trigger snap trap because it goes 180. The Catchmaster Easy Set Rat only opens up 45 degrees. It also has a very easy pre-baiting technology in that hole on the top of the station. It is also very economical and very price effective, cost effective. A24 is probably my favorite. I use this at my house. It is perfect if you're thinking of using a trap outside, because especially with AB 1788, where we know that a lot of these rodents are being scavenged. Well, the A24 will kill the rodent and it will auto reset, leaving that rodent to be scavenged by wildlife. More information, if you want more information, please give us a call. Let us know. We would love to help you out. Always use more than you think you need. Use them in groups. Move objects around to funnel the rodent into the trap. I don't want to keep you guys too long here, guys. So let's, I'm going to talk about exclusion here. So we can kind of get in and out. One thing I do want to mention though about snap traps is the pros and cons are very similar to glue boards. The snap traps are non-toxic, so we can use these in those food processing facilities and health facilities, schools, things like that. Cons, again, rodents that are caught by the leg or tail in snap traps or that suffocate in glue traps, they do not die humanely, and they can be dragging these snap traps all over the place, which is a very unpleasant sight. People say they're stealing my bait. Bobby Corgan says always pre-bait. Like I said earlier, the Catchmaster Easy Set Rat Trap is probably the best snap trap if we're going to be using pre-baiting in our trapping. Exclusion. Exclusion does come with some cautions. There always will be a learning curve. Start small and work up. A lot of people, ask, why do we want to exclude? Well, it is a high dollar job. I mean, it is anywhere from $150 for a small job to upwards of $2,000 for a larger one. After the exclusion, the problem is pretty much solved, and you can have usually a 3 to 4 year warranty. Having annual inspections also keeps you engaged with the client. And also by excluding the rodent from getting into the structure, they will be foraging for food elsewhere, making your stations or traps or glue boards or even your bait more effective. This is just kind of, we're working it all together. We always want to trap and exclude at the same time. Your goal is to eliminate any entry point for rodents, and you must be very, very, very thorough. So signs that we need to look for are rub marks, tail drags, obviously smells, we all know the smells, gnawings, droppings, food prints, and feedings. Real quick, I want to talk about they're gnawers. You know, their name comes from the Latin word rodere, which means to gnaw, and they must consistently gnaw to keep their upper and lower incisors in check. They can actually chew through iron because their teeth are harder than iron and a few other soft metals. We see here this rodent is gnawing through foundation and siding. We see droppings, nestings, feedings, and footprints. They also have what's called vibrissae. And for rodents, the whiskers are the Mercedes-Benz of high-performance sensory pathways. Rodents can detect things with their whiskers or vibrissae that humans cannot see. When they use their vibrissae, they leave behind something called rub marks. And these rub marks is an oily substance called sebum that they leave behind when they're rubbing or crawling or running across baseboards or swinging across the rafters. And they leave these sebum rub marks through using their vibrissae. First thing about exclusion, we want to map it. Pretty much any sort of gap or hole, vents, opening in roof tiles, anything like that, we really want to seal up and exclude. We can use hardware cloth, excluder, stuff it, galvanized steel in those larger holes, foam, detour, mouse stop, and again, guys, using snap traps alongside excluding will always help. Gaps in siding, always peel back your bushes and trees and look behind those bushes and trees because there can be holes underneath the siding where they're crawling up. I'm just going to show you real quick what I did. And so this is an exclusion job I did. If you look on the right picture, I pulled back bushes and trees, and that's where I found this entry point. I stuffed some excluder up in there, screwed it down with a wood screw, and that sealed that entry point off pretty well. We can see all of these oil marks and these rub marks from going in and out of this hole in the foundation. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through what we did. We also found a lot of food that the rodent is storing, tail drags all along these pipes underneath the house in the crawl space. Here's a burrow from probably a Norway rat. We use a lot of snap traps around this nesting and feeding site. The guy that came in before me used a wine cork to seal up a hole. I went behind him and used some hardware cloth as well as some excluding gel. We also have this is the A24 trap I used on my house, using a lot of snap traps while we're excluding. Again, guys, because when we exclude, we're either keeping rodents inside or outside the structure. If there's any rodents inside of the structure, they're going to be continuing to look for food. That's why we need to put a lot of these snap traps on the inside where we are excluding. And then I just put hardware cloth in that foundational hole that I was showing you guys earlier and covered it up with cement and called it good. This picture on the left is on the other side of that foundational hole. Again, I put hardware cloth to exclude it. A little bit of pure black or other caulking material.
Okay, thank you everyone. We really appreciate you being here and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.